The wind howled through the twisting pines of dusk willow forest, rustling the silver leaves like a whisper trying to be heard. A lonely tower stood there, so crooked it looked like it had grown from the earth rather than being built by hands. Its windows blinked with dim, greenish light, flickering like tired eyes that refused to close. High above, the moon hid behind a quilt of clouds, and the night air was thick with the scent of old magic. Inside the tower, a single candle burned, though it was far past midnight. Its flame danced wildly, casting strange shadows on the stone walls where crooked bookshelves leaned like sleepy giants. Bottles shimmered with glowing liquids, maps fluttered without wind, and a feather quill scribbled something on its own, the ink dark as midnight itself. A man in a tattered robe, tall and thin as a walking stick, paced around the tower's upper room. His name was Aldrin, and he was the most powerful sorcerer in all the northern lands. But his eyes were rimmed with red, and his hands shook with weariness. He hadn't slept in over 30 years. Every time Aldrin sat down to rest, his head would droop, and dreams would crawl toward him like long shadows. But he always jolted awake before they could touch him. He feared them, feared what waited behind his eyes when they closed. So, he drank bitter potions to stay awake, spoke to mirrors that whispered nonsense, and scribbled spells he never used. Yet still, his eyelids grew heavier with each night that passed, and his candle shorter. Far below the tower, the forest shifted. Something ancient stirred in the roots and stones. The wind carried the faintest sound, a lullaby, too soft to follow, yet full of secrets meant only for dreamers. Long ago, Aldrin had been a bright and joyful boy who danced through dreams like a bird through clouds. But one night, when he was no older than 12, he dreamed of a deep lake with golden lilies floating on its surface. When he leaned closer, a dark hand rose from the water and pulled him under. He awoke screaming, his heart pounding like thunder in a storm. From that night on, every time he closed his eyes, the same dream returned more vivid, more chilling. The lake grew colder, the hand stronger. Soon, sleep became a doorway he dared not pass through. He believed that something had marked him, something that waited in the world of dreams, and so he vowed never to sleep again. As the years passed, Aldrin became a master of magic, not because he wished to conquer kingdoms or rule with power, but because he hoped one day to create a spell strong enough to erase dreams altogether. He searched ancient scrolls, bartered with cloud spirits, and once climbed into the sky to ask the moon for help, but nothing worked. The dreams always waited. His tower filled with time and silence. He grew older but thinner, his hair turning white like frost. And still, the fear of sleep gnawed at him, quiet and cruel. One evening, as the sun melted behind the trees, a bird, unlike any other, landed on his windowsill. Its feathers shimmered like oil on water, and its eyes were the color of midnight snow. The bird did not speak, but it dropped a single silver feather onto Aldrin's windowsill before flying off into the dusk. Curious, Aldrin picked up the feather. The moment his fingers touched it, the tower went still. Not even the quill moved. A soft hum filled the room, low and sweet, like a song sung by the stars. Then he saw something not in front of him, but inside his mind, a path made of moonlight winding through a forest that was both familiar and strange. A whisper followed, "Seek the Dreamweaver." The vision vanished, and Aldrin was left holding the feather, which no longer shimmered. He placed it carefully in his spellbook and sat down, more shaken than he liked to admit. For the first time in years, he felt something other than fear, curiosity. That night, he didn't drink his potion of wakefulness. Instead, he opened a long-forgotten trunk and pulled out his traveler's cloak. Its fabric still smelled of distant places. With trembling hands, he gathered his staff and the feather, then stepped out into the night. The forest was quieter than usual, as if it too held its breath. He walked for hours, following nothing but the faint feeling in his chest. The silver feather pulsed warmly against his palm whenever he turned the right way, guiding him like a hidden compass. Beneath tall trees and over mossy stones, he went deeper into dusk willow than he had ever dared. Finally, he came upon a clearing lit by fireflies. At its center stood a stone archway covered in ivy. Beneath it, there shimmered a pool of water, not a lake, but a small spring, glowing faintly with golden light. Aldrin's feet stopped. The air here was thick with hush and wonder. As he approached, he saw a figure standing by the water. She was draped in robes made of starlight and shadows, and her hair flowed like water in slow motion. Her face was gentle and old, yet young at once. Aldrin knew at once this was the Dreamweaver. She raised her hand, not in warning, but in welcome. Without a word, she gestured to the spring. Aldrin hesitated. Fear prickled his spine like cold rain. He knew this was no ordinary water. This was dream water. He wanted to run, to flee back to his tower and hide behind candles and spells. But something stronger than fear held him still. He took a step closer. The Dreamweaver reached out and placed her hand over his heart. A warmth spread through him, and for the first time in 30 years, the hand from the lake did not rise in his mind. Instead, he saw memories of laughter with his little sister before she grew ill, of the fireflies he used to catch in jars, of his mother singing while spinning wool. He saw all the dreams he had locked away. And then, the Dreamweaver spoke, not aloud, but inside his chest. Her voice was the sound of wind through leaves. She told him the truth. Long ago, a sorcerer had tampered with the world of dreams, trying to control what could not be held. He had cracked open a gate that separated waking from sleeping, and through it, something cold had crept in a fear that fed on dreams. It had no shape, only a shadow, and it grew stronger the more people forgot the wonder of dreaming. That shadow had found Aldrin when he was a boy, slipping into his dream of the lake, marking him not to punish, but because he was a key, a doorway. The shadow needed a soul strong enough to hold it. But now, the Dreamweaver said, Aldrin could choose. He could open himself again, not to the fear, but to the dream. Not to darkness, but to memory and light. Tears welled in Aldrin's eyes. He had forgotten how heavy his heart had become. The silver feather pulsed once more in his hand. Slowly, he stepped into the spring. The water was warm and clear. It lapped at his ankles, then his knees, and finally over his chest as he sank gently into its embrace. He didn't fall, he floated, and as he did, he let go of fear, of running, of the years spent in candlelight. He closed his eyes. This time, the lake was calm. The lilies were golden still, but they no longer hid a hand. Instead, the water opened into stars, and Aldrin drifted among them like a child held in a lullaby. He was dreaming. Far above, the Dreamweaver watched, her eyes shining. The shadow that had once haunted Aldrin flickered at the edge of the dream, smaller now, weaker. For when a dreamer chooses to face their fear with open eyes and a willing heart, the shadows cannot stay. The forest, too, sighed in peace. Fireflies rose like tiny lanterns, guiding the way home for those who had wandered too far from their dreams. And in the crooked tower of Dusk Willow, the candle finally burned out. When Aldrin awoke, he was no longer in the spring. The soft warmth of water had faded, and now cool grass cushioned his back. Above him stretched a velvet sky filled with stars that shimmered like bells without sound. But these stars did not stay still. They moved in slow spirals, shaping pictures that pulsed and vanished images of places he had never seen, of people he did not know, of creatures with eyes like lanterns and wings made of mist. This was not the waking world, nor was it the old nightmare. He was inside the dream realm now, but something was wrong. A low rumble echoed beneath him. The ground trembled faintly. The stars began to blur, their light dimming. Then, a sharp wind rose from nowhere, carrying with it a voice not spoken, not sung, but felt. It was the voice that had haunted Aldrin for 3 decades. The voice of the shadow. The dream sky tore like fabric, and through it slithered darkness, thick and oily, curling like smoke with claws. The shadow twisted in on itself and formed eyes empty and cold as forgotten winters. It saw Aldrin, and it remembered. He was the boy who had run, the man who had fed it by fearing it. Aldrin stood slowly, gripping the silver feather still tucked in his sleeve. He knew what this was. The dream realm had opened fully, and now the shadow would try to claim him once more to turn his dream into a prison. Around him, the dream began to shift. Trees burst from the ground, their trunks made of stacked books and their leaves whispering in voices too quiet to hear. Water spiraled up from the earth, floating midair before freezing into crystal ladders that led to nowhere. It was beautiful, but unstable. The dream was fighting to protect itself, to hold together. But the shadow was stronger than it had ever been. The shadow lunged. Aldrin raised his staff and cast a bolt of light, bright and fast. It struck the shadow, slicing through it like sunlight through fog. But the darkness curled around the light, absorbing it. The shadow did not flinch. Instead, it laughed, if laughter could sound like breaking bones and falling stars. Aldrin's knees buckled. He felt the weight of all his sleepless years. The fear whispered again in his ear, "Run, hide, wake up, drink the potion, forget this place." But he didn't run. He looked deeper into the shadow and saw something beneath its coils, something human, a shape, hunched and trembling, trapped within. It was the boy he had once been, the boy who had first seen the hand in the lake. The shadow was not just a beast from beyond it, was his fear made flesh, fed by years of fleeing, of refusing to dream, of never letting go. If he wanted to defeat it, he had to do more than fight. He had to forgive it. He had to accept the part of himself he had buried under potions and candlelight. He stepped forward. The shadow shrieked and expanded, towering above him like a thundercloud. It swung a tendril of smoke at him, and it struck his shoulder, sending him to the ground. Pain flared, sharp and real. This was no simple dream it could hurt. It could break him. Still, he stood again. With shaking hands, he pulled the silver feather from his robe. It glowed softly, its light not sharp but steady, like a memory that would not fade. Aldrin held it to his chest. The warmth spread again, the same warmth the Dreamweaver had given him. Then he did the one thing he had avoided for so long. He closed his eyes. The moment he did, the dream world deepened. Colors brightened, shapes sharpened, and sound swelled like a chorus. And then, he spoke not aloud, but into the dream itself. He told the shadow he was no longer afraid. That he remembered the lake, yes. But he also remembered the fireflies, the laughter, the dreams of flying in forests and stars. He remembered what it meant to rest, to wonder, to trust the night. The silver feather shone so brightly now that it cast shadows backward into the sky. The tendrils of smoke recoiled. The shadow hissed, its form cracking like dry earth. Aldrin walked into it. Through the storm of black mist, through the flickering shapes of monsters and memories. He walked toward the boy trapped at its heart. The child curled in fear, shivering, eyes wide with old terror. Aldrin knelt beside him. He reached out not with magic, not with fire or spells, but with his hand, simple, steady, human. The boy looked up. Their eyes met. And in that instant, the shadow screamed and split. Light poured through it like sunlight flooding a cavern. The darkness didn't explode, it softened, faded. It lost shape, returning to mist, then to nothing. The boy blinked once more, then stood. He was Aldrin, too young Aldrin, whole and unafraid. He smiled. They stood together, the child and the man. In the center of the dream realm, the sky stitched itself back together, the stars returning to their graceful dance. Trees steadied, water shimmered. All around them, the dream calmed. But it was not just one dream. As the light returned, Aldrin began to see other dreamers in the distance. Little specks of light in floating bubbles, children asleep in their beds, elders resting in rocking chairs, animals curled in nests, all dreaming. He had not just faced his own shadow. He had weakened something older, something that had darkened the dreams of many. By forgiving his fear, he had given light to others. The Dreamweaver appeared again, rising from the trees like morning fog. Her smile was quiet, but her eyes were full of pride. She raised her hand once more, and a staircase of clouds appeared beneath Aldrin's feet. It was time to return. He walked up the staircase, feather still in hand, and with every step, he felt lighter, not because he had left something behind, but because he had taken something back. The shadow was gone, or at least no longer strong. But dreams would always carry a little fear. That was their nature. And now, Aldrin understood. Fear was not an enemy, it was a signal, a part of dreaming. One that must be met, not run from. He stepped through the final cloud, back into the waking world. The sun was rising over Dusk Willow. The first rays of morning sunlight spilled through the crooked window of Aldrin's tower, golden and quiet. Dew clung to the stone ledge like tiny diamonds, and the pines outside swayed gently in the breeze. Birds had returned. chirping softly as if they, too, sensed a change. Inside, the candle had burned down to nothing but a puddle of wax. The ink bottle was dry, the quill asleep at last. The room, once filled with restless energy and clattering motion, now held a peaceful stillness. Books rested closed, scrolls lay quietly rolled, and for the first time in many, many years, Aldrin slept. He lay curled beneath a faded blue blanket, one hand clutching the silver feather like a child holding a comforter. His face was calm, the lines of worry softened, and a small smile rested on his lips. A soft glow lingered around him, not magical, but dreamlike, as though the light itself respected his rest. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher. When Aldrin finally stirred, it was not from fear, nor from a jolt of dread, but from the gentle warmth of sunlight on his face. He blinked, slowly, then sat up. His body ached from the journey, and his legs felt like twigs. But there was something new inside him, something bright and steady. He had slept, and he had dreamed. He rose and looked around his tower, taking in everything with fresh eyes. The mess of years no longer looked like a fortress, but a shell ready to be shed. Bottles he once clung to now seemed like toys of a long-forgotten game. His staff stood in the corner, but he no longer felt the urge to grip it tightly. With quiet hands, Aldrin lit a fire in the hearth and brewed tea, not a potion, not a spell, just tea, warm and real. He sipped it slowly, letting the steam curl around his nose. It tasted like morning. Later that day, he stepped outside. The forest greeted him with rustling leaves and curious light. He had lived in Duskwillow for so long, yet had never truly seen it. Now, he noticed the way sunlight dappled the mossy stones, how squirrels chased each other through the underbrush, and how butterflies floated like living petals. There was magic here, yes, but not the kind that lived in spells or charms. It was the quiet magic of life, simply unfolding. As he wandered, he came upon a young fox trapped in a bramble bush. Its paw was tangled in thorns, and it trembled with fright. Once, Aldrin might have waved a wand and vanished the bush without a thought. But now, he knelt slowly, speaking not with words but with calm presence. He carefully pushed the thorns aside, murmuring comfort through his hands, and freed the fox. It didn't run right away. It looked up at him, nose twitching, then gave a soft blink before padding off into the trees. Aldrin smiled. Something inside him had shifted, no longer a man hiding from sleep, but one who had embraced it, understood it, and returned changed. That night, as stars lit the sky once more, he sat at his desk with fresh parchment and wrote not spells or defenses, but a letter. Not to anyone in particular, just a message to the world. He wrote of dreams not as scary places, but as gardens that grew when tended with care. He wrote that fear could visit, yes, but that it was not meant to rule. He wrote of the dreamweaver and the shadow, and of the boy who had once trembled, and the man who had found peace. He folded the letter and tied it to the silver feather. Then he stepped out onto the balcony and held the feather high. A breeze lifted it from his fingers. It rose into the air, catching the wind like a leaf on a journey. Aldrin watched as it disappeared into the night, knowing that someone, somewhere, would find it when they needed it most. The days that followed were different. He no longer feared sunset. Instead, he welcomed night as a friend. He slept deeply and dreamed richly of floating islands, of castles made of sand and starlight, of creatures that whispered secrets in languages made of laughter. He began to record these dreams in a journal, drawing little sketches beside each story. Word of the old sorcerer who once feared sleep began to change. The villagers who had once whispered about the strange man in the tower started telling a different tale. They spoke of how he now walked among them, helping mend broken tools with quiet spells, lighting lanterns on foggy nights, and teaching children how to collect dream dust with their imaginations. Some nights, he would sit by the riverbank with the little ones, telling stories by firelight, tales of far-off stars and dream realms, and the magic of facing what frightens you. Children loved him most. They weren't afraid to ask him questions. Is it true you never slept for 100 years? Did you really meet a spirit made of clouds? What does a dream taste like? He would smile and answer every question with a twinkle in his eye. Sometimes his stories were serious, sometimes silly, but always full of heart. And always, he ended each one with the same reminder that dreaming is a gift, and every fear, once understood, can become a doorway. And so, the crooked tower of Duskwillow no longer stood lonely. Its windows glowed warmly at night, not with restless candlelight, but with the soft pulse of dreams. Birds built nests in its eaves, vines bloomed along its stones, and laughter often echoed from its halls. One evening, as Aldrin sat beside his window, watching the stars appear, he felt a presence beside him. A soft hand resting over his heart. Not physical, not seen, but deeply felt. The Dreamweaver! Just for a moment! He closed his eyes and smiled. The world was full of dreams yet to be dreamed, and now he no longer feared any of them. And deep in the dream realm, where stars wrote stories across the sky and rivers flowed upward into song, a small shadow curled itself into a ball and slept, no longer a monster, just a forgotten fear, resting at last. Moral: even the deepest fear can become a path to wonder if we choose to face it with a gentle heart.